Hey everyone, there is a new ETF on the market as of March 5th, and it's pretty interesting considering how 2021 has gone so far. It's essentially an index that tracks social sentiment or the public's opinion of companies and then updates an index in order to reflect that. So it's essentially an index that tracks which companies are getting the most buzz, and in fact, that is the ticker symbol, BUZZ. We're going to go over its methodology, how it works, and some of the holdings that it has. And finally, I'll just share some of my thoughts, closing remarks at the end. So let's go. So let me get this straight. Is this a hype ETF? That's essentially, I think, what BUZZ is it's tracking hype stocks, and I can see why fund managers are kind of getting into this now, especially when you have a year like 2020 and 2019. You have companies like Tesla that have hit market evaluations way above anything that any analyst would say is reasonable, and yet it still continues to kind of do well. Side note, I know Tesla's kind of down right now, but it's still, a really high market price. And then you have a story like GameStop from earlier this year, and what kind of happened there. So if you're kind of like me, I'm usually a little bit hesitant to get in on these things, especially when I don't understand how looking at the fundamentals translate into a really high stock price like that. But essentially that's what this ETF does. So it's started on March 5th. The ticker is BUZZ. It's on the New York Stock Exchange. It's from a management company called VanEck. And I kind of like this website. It doesn't really take itself too seriously, which is an interesting take on investments, I guess. But what it essentially does is tracks 75 stocks getting the most buzz and positive feedback online and puts them in, essentially it's in an index. Indexing ETFs based on momentum isn't anything new, but this is the first time it's being done via an algorithm and analyzing social media. That's kind of the difference here. There can be anywhere from 250 to 350 companies considered, but only the top 75 make the cut. So you have to understand that this index doesn't really follow any fundamentals. It does this algorithm. It analyzes a bunch of comments and likes and social media. So this ETF isn't going to say, oh, the evaluation on Tesla doesn't make sense, so we're not going to invest in it. What this ETF is saying is that people really love Tesla. There's a lot of buzz about Tesla, so we're going to rank Tesla quite high and make it part of this index. Now, a couple kind of disclaimers here. Dave Portnoy is part owner of BUZZ Holdings, who runs that index. He's also buddies with Jim Cramer, which you guys might know from Mad Money. Both of those guys run social media platforms that talk about stocks and like hype stocks and that kind of thing. So they're both obviously advertising BUZZ and seeing BUZZ as something very favorable. So just so you guys know going in, like these guys have a vested interest in BUZZ. All right, so how does this work? I do have to hand it to BUZZ Holdings because they have a pretty fun looking website. It's not as, like I said, as serious as some of the other ones that I've seen, but it does kind of give you the steps of how this goes. So I'll just put up a summary here for you guys. So it analyzes millions of posts and uses AI to figure out the sentiment for certain companies. This algorithm is proprietary, so unfortunately I can't tell you how the algorithm works specifically, but it searches comments and likes and dislikes on social media platforms, blogs, news articles, and all that kind of stuff. Then the algorithm analyzes this data to figure out which companies are being talked about positively and then being favored by the community. Then the BUZZ Nextgen AI US Sentiment Leaders Index, it's the index that sorts all of these companies, is updated, and then the BUZZ ETF is updated to match the index. And then they repeat this cycle, and apparently it's updated every month. Quick side note, guys, before we jump into the fact sheet, if you guys are enjoying this kind of thing, you want updates on new ETFs, or you have some ETFs you're curious about that you would like featured on this channel, remember to leave them in the comments, and also please remember to subscribe and hit the like button. Okay, now let's jump into the fact sheet and kind of look at some of the fundamental pieces of this ETF. Okay, so here's the VanEck website. All this information here, we're actually just going to pull up the fact sheet because all of it is kind of repeated in there. I'll leave a link to all of this in the description, of course. I always do that. Just going over this, the fund description, it's basically saying that it seeks to track the BUZZ Nextgen AI US Sentiment Leaders Index. which is intended to track the performance of 75 large cap US stocks, which exhibit a degree of positive investor sentiment and bullish perception. So these are all stocks people think are going to be doing good. Ticker is BUZZ. The total net assets that are in here right now, 1.21 million from when they published this PDF. If we go, so it's traded on the New York Stock Exchange, options are available. The currency is in US dollars, 75 holdings as it's stated. Price to earnings and price to book ratios are, you'll notice, are quite high. Well, that is because people believe in these stocks and probably making them a little bit overvalued. It's also due to the nature of the types of stocks that are in here. There's more probably technology stocks, and those typically have higher price to earnings ratios. The weighted average market cap, $295 million, which is actually quite small compared to some of the other ETFs that we looked at. And then there's a stat here for the NAV 52-week high and low, but this doesn't mean much because it's only been out for a few days. Normally for the performance history, I'd go in here and look. Right now, this is just a first look video at this ETF, but I'd really like to come back in a month or two and see how it's tracking the NAV to the share price, how the ETF is performing, because this is a really interesting space to start getting into. Last thing, of course, you want to know about the management expense ratio, so 0.75%. That's probably on the higher end for me of what I would like to get into for an ETF. Understandably, there's a lot of changing in this ETF, requires a little bit of management, so that's why it's higher than a regular index fund. We'll go back here, see if there's anything else that's interesting. Here's the full list of companies that are on here. And you know what's interesting about this is I've heard of almost every single one of these, which just goes to show you it's doing exactly what the ETF says it would do. I've heard of all of these: Activision, Etsy, Caterpillar, Starbucks. Like, you would recognize all of these names. BlackRock, that's an investment company. Visa, Roku, Coca-Cola, Salesforce, I've heard of that. There's not a lot on here that's really foreign to people, but the fact that I can go through all of these names, it kind of tells me, like, you know what? There might be something here. So in the overview, there's a little bit more information, and you can see here, like, it's starting to track the NAV. You don't have a lot of data points here. So far, days closed at a premium. There's 4 at a discount. It's just 1. It's going to track its own performance, but again, this will mean more in about, let's say, a month when we come back and look at this again. It is a list of the top 10 holdings, the country weightings. You can see most of it is in the US. There's a little bit of Canada and Switzerland, but the description did say it's mostly in the US. And here's the breakdown of the different industries. This part is kind of nice in the fact that it is diversified over different industries and not just focused on like technology and IT. There are some other kind of hyped stocks in here that it is tracking. So I'm not going to go through every one of these tabs because this overview pretty much covers everything. But that just gives you an idea of what this ETF is kind of going for. So now I'm definitely curious about this ETF. It's definitely one that's going to be on my radar. I haven't invested since I've been kind of recording this video, but I gotta say, the more I read about it, the more I'm kind of thinking, this is sort of interesting, especially when you have, like I said, stories like GameStop. And would this have even caught GameStop? And I wanted to figure that out. Well, I'll put up the chart right now of kind of the events that happened with GameStop. Now, I understand during the recording of this video, GameStop is up again, but let's see if all that social media coverage that it got in January would have sort of registered on this ETF. So looking at the chart, and please understand, I don't actually know what time of the month that BUZZ would have updated this ETF. I think the event with GameStop would have been too quick to be registered on this index. It's not currently in the 75 holdings. I've already checked, and then just looking at the sequence of events, it was about $20 at the start of January. It spiked and was at $245 at the start of February. Then it went back down to $40 shortly thereafter. So depending on when the index was refreshed, it may have completely missed the event with GameStop. But personally, I don't really mind that. I would like something that is hyped over a little bit of a longer term, something similar to Tesla, rather than something that kind of hits the news, spikes, and goes away. It will be interesting to see on the next update if GameStop will be one of the top 75. So there you have it, guys. Those are my thoughts on this ETF. It's definitely cool. I think the biggest takeaway is the fact that this can even be done now with some of those events like GameStop. Fund managers are going to be really interested to know what people think is going to be a good company and want to invest in those companies too. So of course they're starting to set up algorithms to figure this stuff out. So just keep in mind, it's not based on any fundamentals. If I were to invest in this, and I'm thinking whether I should or not, I'll probably just wait a little bit and see. But if I were to do so, I probably want to make this a smaller part of my portfolio just because it might be a little more volatile than I'd like. I kind of want to see how this monthly update really affects the value of this ETF. Anyway, ETFs on hype stocks. Really interesting. What do you guys think? Would this be something you guys would invest in? Do you think this is the future of investing? Let me know in the comments below. As always, the discussion is always great. But until next time, have a great week. Spread the wealth, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.